Okay, so we're going to give it a minute or two more to let people join. I will let everyone know this is our most well-attended Zoom since we've started them back in March or April. So thank you, everyone.
No pressure.
Yeah. And I'm sure everyone is fairly, comfortable with Zoom by now. How this is going to work is I'm going to have everyone but Ellen muted so that we don't get any background interference while she's speaking, and then we will open it up for a Q&A at the end. I'm also recording it because we are going to put it on YouTube for people to watch later. So yeah, so everyone on their best behavior, please.
Oops.
Let's see here. All right. Okay. Yes, and if anyone else joins, we'll add them in. So, so my name is Julie, and I'm the events manager at Roundabout Books. So if you haven't been able to come in for a live event before we had to do these, then you might not have seen me before, but I thank everyone for being here. And we do hope that we will get back to in-store events at some point, but we're going to stick with Zoom for right now for everyone's safety. So we are so excited to welcome Ellen Waterston to speak with us about her books. So I am sure most of you know who she is, but for those who might be watching later, I'm going to read a small bio of hers off of our website. Ellen Waterston is the author of Where the Crooked Desert Rises, a High Desert Home memoir, High Desert Home, a memoir, 4 poetry collections, and a verse novel. She is the founder and president of the Waterston Desert Writing Prize and the founder of the Writing Ranch in Bend, Oregon. Today, we're going to be talking about walking the high desert, encounters with rural America along the Oregon Desert Trail. So, let me just clear that off my screen. And we're going to go this way. Ellen, I know that you have probably done a load of events over the years. So at this point, I'm just going to kind of turn it over to you. Tell us about your new book and anything else you want us to know about. And then, like I said, at the end, we'll do some Q&A from our attendees.
And just a housekeeping question, Julie. You'll be collecting the questions off of chat and directing them to me at the end?
Well, if anyone does want to do that, they're able to put them in the chat window, but we will actually unmute people if they want to talk directly to you. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, here we go. All I can say is if you're in Bend, Oregon today and doing this, you're very devoted book people, devoted to Roundabout Books, and maybe need to get out more often because the weather is gorgeous out there. But I'm so appreciative of your attendance and interest today, and good afternoon to virtually everyone. And Julie, thank you very much. And thanks to Roundabout Books for helping propel walking the high desert out into the world. I am indebted to the many trail angels who supported me throughout this literal and metaphorical walk. I want to make sure people, and those of you who have the book and have already poked your noses into it, know it's not a travel guide per se, or else it's a travel guide to almost everything. But the book writing and making process was so assisted and aided by the University of Washington Press. I want to make special mention of them. It's a blend of travelogue, memoir, meditation, history, current events, philosophy, science, and commonplace book, which is really, what we all do: keep journals, stick things in, try to remember to do it, keep notes of dreams or conversations. It kind of began that way. And this book was completed BC, before COVID. And BLM, in the context of this book, stands for the Bureau of Land Management, not Black Lives Matter. However, the challenges this nonfiction grapples with as the narrative makes its way across this beautiful part of Oregon's high desert turn out to be issues that are uncannily pertinent to what is taking place right now, including pestilence by way of our growing, thriving tick population that is offering diseases that we didn't really have to deal with in Central Oregon a few years ago, and systemic racism. I'll be reading to you a little bit about that today. Challenges, it turns out, that this high desert has in common with many places in the United States, if not the world. So I use the Oregon Desert Trail as connective tissue in this book. The ODT, as it's referred to, was conceived by Brent Fenty, the former executive director of ONDA, the Oregon Natural Desert Association, and he is now the executive director of a new land trust, the Oregon Desert Land Trust. He conceived of it as a through hike, starting at the Oregon Badlands Wilderness outside of Bend, and winding up 750 miles later at the Owyhee Canyon lands, located in the far southeastern corner of the state. ONDA's motivation and Brent Fenty's motivation was to both establish a new through hike, but also to build awareness of a little known, vast and fragile part of the world, as that organization strove and continues to strive to protect, this is their mantra, protect, defend, and preserve the wilderness of this desert for future generations. And there's good reason to do so. And I'm reading. The 8 million acre area in central and southeastern Oregon that ONDA makes its business includes the second longest free-flowing river in the continental United States, flora and fauna particular to and requiring this landscape, and some of the most remote locations in America, including the largest swath of roadless area in the lower 48, quote, that should but doesn't yet have federal protection, unquote, as Tim Neville wrote in the New York Times after a trip he took with Fenty into the Owyhee Canyon lands. Fenty hopes, ONDA hopes, that this desert will avoid being one more region where, as Fenty says, man carries on his old habits, makes his old mistakes, until the naturalness of the place is demolished. Without wilderness, as the late David Brower of the Sierra Club said, the world is just that much closer to becoming a cage. So that is the good reason to do so. And I just want to follow that up with an encounter I had with Brent Fenty as I was working on this book in and around 2016. I stood in line behind him. We were waiting for a chance to shake hands with former President Bill Clinton. Remember those days, campaigning in Bend on behalf of his wife's presidential bid? Sorry about your luck there, folks, didn't happen. Brent had taken his 10-year-old daughter out of school so she could also meet the former president. While we waited, Brent reminded his daughter of their family trip to Yellowstone National Park. The man she was about to meet was the one who signed legislation allowing for the reintroduction of wolves to that park. And the Grand Staircase Escalante Monument, did she remember going there? She nodded yes enthusiastically. The man she was about to meet created that national monument. From family dinner table conversations, Fenty's young daughter knew her father was working hard at the time to persuade Congress to set aside 2.5 million acres of wilderness as part of the Owyhee Canyon lands conservation proposal. Maybe one day she'd be able to go there and say to herself, my father did that. But this day, she had plenty of reason to be proud of her father's work already, not the least of which was his role in getting the Oregon Badlands Wilderness approval across the finish line and subsequently creating the Oregon Desert Trail. And I would encourage all of you to keep track of the progress good and bad, one step forward, two step back of the Owyhee Canyonlands conservation proposal. And Brent set out to do this with this through hike notion. As you know, there are plenty of through hikes in the world, some more famous than others, some longer than others. And around the world, I'm reading, through hiking is a thing now. The young, the lean, and the restless travel the world in pursuit of bragging rights as they put another through hike notch in their belt, each trek equally or more challenging than the last. If you can imagine it, by through hike standards, the ODT at 750 miles is quite short, the average being closer to 2,000 miles. Cheryl Strayed's book Wild and the subsequent movie starring Reese Witherspoon featured the author's experiences hiking the 2,650-mile Pacific Crest Trail. For the urban masses, it popularized the idea of taking on tough physical through hikes, as in Strayed's case, a form of physical personal therapy. She recovered from the death of her mother, a divorce, and an appetite for recreational drugs. Not all requirements. Shin splints, dehydrated dinners, and blisters became cool. I will say that, in fact, hiking isn't only wasted on the young, it's big among the over 50 crowd. In fact, retirees into their 80s have completed the through hike, meaning nonstop. Needless to say, as a self-proclaimed geezer jock who loves the high desert, I do what is more typical of the majority of those approaching the ODT, which is to hike sections at a time and returning to certain favorite ones. And the top 10 really on the Oregon Desert Trail are the Diablo Rim east of Summer Lake, Fremont and Albert Loops, Steens Mountain, Pueblo Mountain south of the Steens, and most spectacular of all, the Pillars of Rome and West Little Owyhee Canyonlands in the far southeastern corner of Oregon. This book takes you to these places, and always in our backpacks, we've got to have water, food, compass, maps, matches, flashlight, bug repellent, sleeping bag, and carry with us always, every day, the challenging questions to be answered, not only on demands for public lands, but the other issues that are characterized and represented by this high desert. So I'd like to read excerpts about the importance of paying attention to biography of place. Each of you have one. Have you ever thought of your life in terms of the biographies of place, the places that have really written you, as this high desert seems to have written me? The cautionary tale of the Ammon Bundy occupation, how significantly it turned out to affect the 2016 election and really is playing out in much of the divisiveness we're seeing now in ways that are frightening, frankly. The dark sky movement that is addressed in the book, Pine Mountain Observatory, noticing the light domes developing over Bend and Redmond, which eventually will grow big enough to obscure some of our beautiful dark skies at night. The Oregon Desert Trail happens, just coincidentally, to parallel some of the most dark skies in the United States. And there are significant efforts taking place to create national sort of skylands, just like national parks, where light pollution is controlled and or prohibited. I would like to read about history repeating itself, whether it's homesteaders being fooled into thinking there was water and soil for farming in the high desert, and all came Homestead Act after Homestead Act falling for the snake oil salesman, and even now we can see developments that had a lot of promise, and for one reason or another, economic, generally speaking, aren't making it. And I talk a lot about sort of the poster child, at least along the desert trail, that personifies that for me, which was in Christmas Valley. I want to just jump for a second to tell you about how I pieced this all together, because when the Oregon Desert Trail was first announced, I had the idea, a small undertaking really at the time, to trace its route from Bend to the Owyhee Canyonlands and address how, by virtue of how the trail twisted and turned, it underscored land use issues. But thanks to the occupation, the plot skidded off the road before I even really began. And the foment that surfaced as a result was evidence of an anger and unrest that simmered nationwide. What else in this arid place, I wondered, was a poster child for national issues and concerns. So you'll see that theme coming up a lot in my comments today and as you read the book. And again, I think the staying power by virtue of what these issues are and their relevance to what we're dealing with today. As it turns out, there are a lot of things about the high desert that have relevance. Water resources, land use, rural-urban divide, pollution, poverty, loss of species, radicalism, racism, environmentalism, natural resource harvest, speculative development. So I divided the book into sections, and each section into chapters that address these regional issues and were first cousins to national ones. In the process, many places and people became star players in this odyssey across the Oregon outback. Both sides of the conflicts proved persuasive, compelling. Indeed, over and again, possibility of a common solution seemed irredeemably high-centered, except when it wasn't. And we'll address that a little bit more subsequently. So the dark sky movement, history repeating itself, wisdom of the first peoples, and now their reclamation of their power and presence, the loss of species, not only flora and fauna, but language, cultures, whether it's the Northern Paiute languages and culture, whether it's the Buckaroo culture and the very specific language associated with them. I'd love to read to you about all of this, but you'd all be just run screaming out of the theater if I did. It would last much too long. So instead, I'm going to read just a few short excerpts and be happy to speak more about some of these other issues that I've just mentioned in passing. So I'd like to read first one about pestilence. I said that we have pestilence in the tick, and it's certainly true. Don't cancel a trek through the high desert because you're afraid of snakes. They are far more afraid of you. If you think you're in snake territory, clap, make noise, let them know you're coming. They aren't big on surprises. Most who live in the desert respect the rattlesnake and leave it alone, unless and until it is too close to home. A cowboy acquaintance of mine mastered the questionable practice of sneaking up on a rattlesnake that favored the sunny back stoop of his ranch house by grabbing its tail and whiplashing it with such force the neck of the snake snapped. My own anecdote that gave new meaning to a snake in the grass was when my firstborn, 6 months old at the time, was playing contentedly on a blanket on the lawn behind our ranch house. And I should insert here that I have ranched in this area and also in Montana for close to 3 decades. Now, of course, I live in town in Bend, Oregon. I was gardening nearby and between us, a lawn sprinkler. I assumed the hissing I heard was a leak in the sprinkler hose, but it was not. It was a Great Basin rattlesnake coiled, ready to strike my infant daughter. Don't ask me how, likely with the garden hoe, but that snake was instantly chopped into pieces. It was the first time I personally experienced the instinctive, involuntary response of a mother protecting her young. Rattlesnake stories abound, but in truth, the average number of bites in Oregon annually is around 50, nationally 7,000, and they rarely cause death. On the off chance you do get snake bit, do not apply a tourniquet, remove jewelry in anticipation of swelling, and find a doctor. No, the real culprits on the ODT are much smaller and less fabled: mosquitoes and ticks. Standing water and warm temperatures are mosquitoes' idea of heaven. And in the spring and summer, if you see the Marlboro man with his white tube socks pulled ingloriously up over his Wrangler pant cuffs, take note. Central Oregon's wood and dog ticks carried by deer and hanging out on sagebrush and other low-growing shrubs not only carry Rocky Mountain fever, but now Lyme disease. Named after the small town of Lyme in western Connecticut, where it originated, it has now migrated to the high desert, testament to the fact that in good ways and bad, we are one, citizens of a borderless planet Earth. And I think we're seeing how very true that is with Corona right now. And what about racism? This is a slightly longer excerpt, and I trust that Julie will wave frantically at me when we're getting close to time. This is from the chapter titled Rurally Underserved. I'm an NBA fan, go figure. Those who know me would never have guessed. I attribute it to the fact that when my late husband and I first moved to our high desert ranch north of Brothers, Oregon, the Blazers had won their 1977 NBA title, Blazer Mania. The whole state seemed like a small town, one community cheering for one same thing, one shared focus, one hope, one realized victory. Over the intervening years, I've sat courtside at Blazer games and shouted, "Jerome, take me home," in the 90s, chanted "the ref beats his wife" with the best of them, tried to take life's hits the way Robin Lopez took the more literal kind under the basket, cheered the Lillard-McCollum duo, enjoyed a VIP dinner with the team, but I have to say, the single most entertaining basketball game I ever saw was at the Paisley, Oregon school gym. Paisley is a sports-friendly and especially basketball-friendly town. Balls are left in the paved blacktop community playground, the nets, albeit a bit frayed, the hoops a bit rusted. After a meal at the Pioneer Saloon, you can play a quick round of horse before hitting the road, a rural digestif. The town's high school is so small you're inadvertently on court when you sit courtside in the wooden bleachers. As the game unfolds in sync with the stampede of players up and down the court, spectators tuck or bend their legs to stay out of the way, a kind of seated chorus line. The game I attended was against Christian Academy of Bend, a fellow 1A team, the classification based on school population, with 1A being the very lowest. The score was tied, double overtime. As a last-ditch effort, Paisley brought in a free thrower who had not been on the court thus far into the game, a slight, wiry kid from Montenegro. This was his first season of basketball. For that matter, this was his first season in America, a year at Paisley High School. He was slight, small, with a corona of wild black hair. He walked to the line, shrugged a couple of times, and took a deep breath. To tie and keep the overtime going, he had to make one basket. To end the overtime and win the game, he had to make two. He sank them both. Everyone, including the opposing team, was dumbfounded. as was he. After a momentary stunned silence, everyone leapt to their feet, cheering the newly minted hero. Paisley is a good resupply point for ODT through hikers. After Summer Lake, having temporarily forgotten how dry the desert can be, you have a new lease on life. Plus, there's the well-stocked Paisley Mercantile, gun right signs in the window notwithstanding, a restaurant, a library, a post office, drive-through coffee, and the nearby Summer Lake hot springs, all a trekker could want. Paisley is in Lake County, a county that has no stoplights and more roadless area than anywhere in the United States outside of Alaska. Part of the Oregon outback, the county has as many square miles as people, 8,000. After Lakeview, population 2,300, and Christmas Valley, population 1,300, Paisley is the county's third largest community with a robust population of 200. Paisley has its own school district, administrative offices, and classrooms housed in one old stone building. The school serves approximately 90 students, K through 12, the number rising and falling depending on which ranch hands and ranch owners have school-aged children on a given year, how many graduated the previous spring, or which Paisley enterprise has expanded or shuttered. In Lake County, there's no excuse for not attending college after graduation, thanks to Lakeview's Educational Trust Fund, established in the 1900s by Dr. Bernard Daly. Along with a number of other scholarships, it finances a college education for Lake County students who complete all 4 years of high school in the county. The not good news, after the good news of those scholarships, is that the Paisley School is constantly dodging the threat of closure. If its enrollment drops too low, it doesn't qualify for state support and can't pay staff. In 1995, to prevent that possibility, the school board decided to create an international dormitory for high school students. The program attracts about 12 students a year from all over the world, about a third of the upperclassmen. Former Paisley School District Superintendent William Wirtz put it bluntly, if we don't have kids in our dorm, we don't have a high school. That ringer from Montenegro who sealed the basketball victory for Paisley, he was one of the international students. They think they're coming to the America of their imaginations. Hip, urban, Las Vegas or Los Angeles or New York, not the big empty, as Lake County is sometimes referred to. I would love to capture on video their arrival and the expressions of shock when they see the dorm, the town, the vast landscape. And then I'd like to return in a few weeks to document the signs of them starting to love the community, its people, and vice versa. In 2015, John Steffes and Rebecca Steele, an intrepid young couple from Portland, purchased the Pioneer Saloon, one of the oldest pubs in Oregon. It started serving drinks in 1883. The couple collaborated with Paisley School to raise money for school field trips, whereby the international students, one per month, would take over the Pioneer Saloon's kitchen and prepare a traditional meal from their country. They would print information about their homeland on placemats, including a reproduction of their national flag and a few statistics like population, religion, type of government, followed by a description of the meal they will serve. The simple act of breaking bread together at the Pioneer, young people serving the community, is the ultimate friendly persuasion, gently changing the diner's opinions about people of color and of different religious persuasions, given the fact that these students are coming from all over the world. It's powerful in its simplicity and a model for healing divisions in the so-called United States and the world. Mind you, this is a county and community that is 90% white and politically red. The common denominator among all residents is hard work. Given the vagaries of cattle prices, fuel prices, the weather's effect on hay crops, and so on, income is middle to low, even for those families who own their large ranches free and clear. Only the large corporate ranches have a significant margin for financial error. Paisley has Methodist, Jehovah's Witness, and Catholic churches. I think it's fair to assume people of color or with different religious beliefs don't generally fit in the worldview held by most in and around Paisley. But in addition to the friendly and persuasive effect of the presence of the international students, open-mindedness is being encouraged in other and unanticipated ways that promote a more accepting outlook, whether Paisley residents are happy about it or not. The Catholic Church has an increasingly difficult time recruiting priests to rural parishes, and in many cases, Catholic churches, including those along the Oregon Desert Trail, are led by priests from African countries, from India, the Middle East, Mexico, or Central America. In Paisley, those who might harbor an attitude about people of color are not only being served a meal by people of color, they are confessing their sins to a person of color. As Michelle Obama says in her memoir, Becoming, it's harder to hate up close. I hope I do justice in this book to the beauty of the desert. I'd love to read you excerpts about its beauty, but if you live anywhere near it, just go find out for yourself. And there are so many issues that it addresses along the way that do seem impossible to resolve. However, as I went and as I researched, I found extraordinary examples modeled by high desert communities, not the least of which is the High Desert Partnership that brought together Burns and the residents after the Bundy occupation, but they'd been in place before resolving very difficult land use issues and the sage grouse protection issues that was scaring ranchers and a real campaign on the part of environmentalists. So there are so many sweet models that are perfectly exportable if only we would. I just want to conclude. Don't you think this is a good time, Julie? One more short reading. So toward the end of the book, I asked the reader, when you cup your hands over these pages and chapters and words, where do you feel the most warmth? And I'm betting it's the stories, the anecdotes. Listening to, seeing the person across the table as an aspect of yourself, there's the rub and the answer. During the second half of life, according to author James Hollis, the focus changes from the external, what does the world ask of me as professional, partner, parent, to an inside job. What question do I answer with my life? Each of us, according to Hollis, is a crucial part of a great unfolding. Something is living us more than we are living it. We don't create ourselves, we happen to ourselves. We don't make our story makes us. As W.H. Auden wrote, we are lived by powers we pretend to understand. The common denominator for a tenable future requires staying at the table until we discover our shared humanity. Don't take your life personally, take it to the limit. To heal the effects of the Bundy occupation and the rude desecration of the refuge headquarters, that was, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the Malheur National Wildlife Headquarters were occupied in 2016, January 2016, by a group of armed people who wanted all federal lands returned to private ownership. To heal the effects of that occupation, Bend residents Jay Bowerman and his wife, Teresa, turned to music, commissioning a symphony as salve, as blessing. They enlisted Chris Thomas, a young and accomplished Los Angeles-based composer who spent hours in the refuge recording the wind and the bird call, turning those sounds into orchestration. In May of 2019, I drove to Burns for the premiere. It was held in the high school gym. Banners extolling the Burns Highlanders were suspended from the rafters. The school slogan of "Let fear be far from all," that almost makes me cry actually today, was painted in large letters across the cement block wall. It was in that very gym in 2016 at rancorous meetings between area residents, law enforcement, federal government representatives, media from all over the world, really, and the Bundy contingent took place. At the time, there was no sign of any willingness to turn swords into plowshares. The world was flat. But on the afternoon of the premiere, the world was round. The gym was filled, estimated 500 in attendance, with a very different energy. The audience included old and young farmers, business owners, ranchers, local officials, Paiutes from the nearby Burns Paiute Reservation, busloads of Bendites, fathers in John Deere caps with children in tow, little girls in princess dresses, a poet from nearby Hines who leaves poems in Ziploc bags along the town's walking trail for people to take and enjoy. The Central Oregon Symphony musicians from Bend, clad formally in black dresses or tuxedos, tuned their instruments, the cacophony like the squabbling and squawking of a flock of cranes coming in for a landing. The Harney County judge welcomed everyone. Maestro Michael Gesme, conductor of the Central Oregon Symphony, came on stage, took the baton in hand, and raised it in the air. A live recording of the song of the red-winged blackbird opened the symphony. Soon, violin and cello began to weave their way in unobtrusively, seamlessly. The movements evoked the early formation of the Malheur Basin, offered a musical tribute to the Paiute, visited the darker chapters and recent darker chapters in Malheur history, celebrated all birds of the refuge, and it concluded with an uplifting musical fanfare, a toast to the future of the region. When it was over, everyone jumped to their feet, whistling and cheering. True art appeals to our humanity, Chris Thomas said. It has the power to heal and connect us, to move us from focusing on our differences to what we have in common. It is now to each of us to create movement and momentum toward commonality, to perceive what is and smartly inform what will be, and in so doing, make sure this desert, this region, this nation, this world can continue to ask the questions worth asking, to seek the answers worth seeking. For those of us who love the Oregon outback, it is up to us to shape and ensure the future of all that the high desert embraces, critters, people, magical places, so those who follow can also rejoice in Earth's bold collision with sky, the iridescence of the raven feather, the magnificent canvas of the Great Basin. We must think like an otter, an owl, a lily, a lupin, think like a Sawyer, an eagle, a Paiute, a settler, a cowboy, a Kenyan, so those following can discern the faint contrails of our triumphs and tragedies, of the right work we accomplished, writ across this scape. And within those chalky tracings, next generations can inscribe their own stories of what's best for most. We'll do this. Of course we will. And so will those who follow, because it's the meet and right thing to do. And just watch this straight-faced desert crack a smile of deep gratitude. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you so much. So I'm going to, let's open it up to questions for Ellen. Just to make things easier, since I can see most people, if you can raise your hand, and then I can kind of call on you. So yeah, Chris, let's go ahead with you first.
Okay, Ellen, I want to thank you so much for memorializing that premiere of the Malheur Symphony. I was one of the people on the bus from Bend who also shared that incredibly magical and special occasion. And it was a thrill to me yesterday when I saw that you'd written about it and to hear it again. And then the second thing I have is a question, and that is, did you have trouble following the trail?
Okay, as I stated at the beginning, and I was hopping around, I apologize, quite a bit early in this reading. If you do it as a through hike, there are sections that are very difficult to follow. It is not marked. There's no signage. There's no informational plaques. So there are sections, but the sections, the more popular sections, are relatively easy to follow.
Okay.
And thanks to Renee Patrick's work at ONDA, and every iteration, her maps and guidebook, which is quite significant. It includes, sort of topographical and walking, and when you're on, established trails that were made for, I don't know what, Forest Service or whatever. So that resource is really, really wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But don't do it alone.
No, but I thought, I'm really not going to do a huge through hike at my age, but I thought I could go with a friend and maybe knock off a section down in Fremont Forest or something like that.
Most definitely.
But I'll look for Renee's book. I'm a member of ONDA. I mean, I can get this.
Yeah,
so
you can get it, and it's online, I think, too. So
okay, great. Thank you.
So Kathleen, I see your hand up, and I just sent you have to approve being unmuted. I think it should show on your screen. There we go. Okay.
Okay. So, thank you. I have a friend, Barbara Kennedy, who first introduced me to you. So I read Crooked River and Via Lactica. And even though you claim this is not a travel book, I just moved from Cape Cod after 20 years. I bought it for that because it seemed to be an honest statement, having read your other works, of what this would be. And then I watched the ONDA presentation with Renee Patrick of her hike through there. So I appreciate it a lot. And I just want to share one thing. So it's not really a question, and I didn't get to the last chapter yet, but almost. But in 13, what's your occupation? There's a statement that says, you write, plant a small flag, a promise to myself as I look out over the Alvord desert below. How I love this big country. I'm getting a little verklempt, sorry. And so it's really unusual for me to come from New England to try to get a sense of this land. And I did some fence pulling in the Badlands and whatnot. But anyway, so I just want to say, snaps for you. I just appreciate it.
well, I mean, and I'm a New Englander.
I know you are.
And that this desert has so, I mean, the desert has been steadfast. My life here has been a rodeo. But I will say that, and I think in this time when we're all wondering, what can we do? What can I do? What can one do? I struggle with that all the time. But I do think I have a short poem in which I say, here is my tilse, which may not be the perfect use of that word in that poem, but heck, it rhymes kind of with life. To stake out a piece of land and write it back to life. So I think each of us, relative to our passion, that's still the difference to make. We don't need to change horses completely.
Right, yeah. So anyway, thank you.
Well, thank you.
We do have a couple of questions in the chat, so I'll read them. This is from Teresa Ashford. She says, would you be willing to share again who the following quote was from? And the quote is, without wilderness, the world is that much closer to becoming a cage.
I think that was Brower from, and Teresa is welcome to go to my website and send me an email, and I'll give her the exact source.
Excellent. And then Pam and Peter Haran, I hope I'm saying that correctly, said, can you please repeat the top hikes on the ODT?
Okay. Yes, I think I have that right here. It was right here. It might take me just a half a second to find that. Oh, here we go. So the top 10, Diablo Rim is on the east side of Summer Lake. And if you've not gone to Summer Lake or spent time there, the north end has the most extraordinary bird refuge. And frankly, I think it rivals the Malheur, especially given the, talk about occupation, the occupation of the carp is taken over the waters of the Malheur. So, but Diablo Rim is on the far side. And again, you can get maps specific to that little section. So going from, say, Summer Lake store to the end of the lake and on to Paisley. It's a trek, but it's a doable trek. Then the Fremont and Abert loop is, again, it's longer. The Fremont Ridge, Winter Ridge above Summer Lake is sort of its own thing, and you can do that by a section. It's now part of a very ambitious mountain bike trail that starts all the way at the Canadian border and stays on public lands the whole way, including along Winter Ridge. So you can pick and choose little sections of the section. So I mentioned those. Steens Mountain, obviously. We know that. The Pueblos south of the Steens, that is a section I have not done, but everybody who has says it's the unsung section. It's flirting with being in Nevada, the Pueblos do. So, you know, it's a commitment to being way the hell and gone. Obviously the Pillars of Rome and the Owyhee Canyonlands. And if you're into float trips, Onda does a float trip there. So you have done, you're nodding. Yeah. So that's really worth, it's a beautiful way to access that part of the world. So yeah. And I would ask for, again, poor Renee, I'm going to give her a third job, but I'd ask her again, you know, what her recommendations are and all of that kind of thing. I mean, just even hiking Cat Canyon out of Paisley and pitching your tent at one of their very nice campsites along the Chihuacan River, you can't go wrong. It's just such big country, you know, just such big country. Yeah.
All right, excellent. Do we have more questions?
Let's see.
Oh, yes, hold on just 1 second. Let me unmute. I see your hand up, so it should show up on your screen saying to unmute as well, sir. Yep, go ahead.
Yes, on one of my trips out to Oregon, you sent me to Burns, and I loved it. Does the trail go through Burns?
Well, not directly. Not directly. You go out of the Badlands and you head to Christmas Valley. So you're not heading out toward Burns at that point. And then you skirt back into Malheur. So, you know, Burns is always sort of off in the distance. Yeah. However, if you go to Burns, it has a wonderful new hotel.
Oh, I loved Burns. Thank you for sending me there.
You're welcome.
Right. And we have another question in the chat. It says, are you working on anything currently for print? Any new books?
Such is the disease of the writer, yes. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. And okay, yeah, Linda, hold on just 1 second. Let me get you unmuted. And it should show up. Yep, go ahead.
Hi, Ellie, great to see you. I was
Nice
just
to
delighted. We just came to Bend last night, got the newspaper and saw that you were doing this today.
Oh,
And I left my copy of the book at home, but I'm eager to get started on it. One thing I was wondering, did you run into resistance from people as you were making the trek? I mean, people who did not want to talk with you, who were suspicious or concerned about your motives for conversations?
So first I want to be clear about the phrase making the trek. I didn't start and go to the end.
Mm-hmm.
So I did these little pieces here and there, and so I guess I had the sense that I kind of knew them because of my years of ranching, and I knew their position sort of politically and also in terms of land use. I'm sure I've offended. I mean, I detour in this book. I go way off the trail with sort of anecdotes and other experiences. So I'm sure I'm not going to be welcome at the Paulina country store ever again, for example. But you know, I think that I just think it's that thing of there's a scene at the end of karaoke in the Paisley Saloon. They took away the karaoke machine, which is too bad. But it was a classic situation of town people, local ranchers, local business owners at the bar, and then these artists from the Artist Playa residency program for artists and scientists, and it became this kind of anecdotal competition between the two groups, who got the most points for their karaoke performances. And you'll read in the book that though the artists lost, by then the local contingent were so appreciative of the effort of this one woman in particular that it just became a wonderful party, and it was a funny way to bond. And it's sort of like the students serving the resident. That's sort of how we get so high above these issues. We forget to just talk. That's why what's happening in Portland with these disguised military people, you can't, how do you talk? How can you even talk? You can't. It's just to me, it's metaphorically classic.
Oh. Well, thank you, because I really had this question about, because it was such a crazy time, you know, after the occupation. I mean, it's been a crazy time for a while, but wondering if people were sort of on edge.
They're on edge, but you know, the other great thing is to know that these rural communities are as diverse in their thinking as bigger communities too. Right. So it's not that they responded in a certain way. They're, you know, some of them, I mean, there's a wonderful woman who lives out near Malheur, a former vet, veterinarian. And during the protest marches in Burns, she was on the, you know, get rid of the Bundy occupation side of the street. And somebody she knew and really liked was standing on the opposite. And she said, "What the hell are you doing over there? Get your ass on this side." You know, it's just this. So I don't know. We all need to take a lesson from the desert. Thank you all so much for really and truly for being part of this, for letting me know what you feel and think about this book. I'd love to hear any responses about that. It's a different style for me, and so.
Yes. Thank you everybody for joining us today. If you haven't picked up a copy of the book yet, please come by Roundabout. We are open, I think, most days 10 to 4, Sundays 10 to 2. We have outside pickup on our little red bench. If you aren't comfortable coming inside the store, just give us a call. It's 541-306-6564, and our website, roundaboutshop.com. But we are so appreciative of everyone who is supporting Roundabout, any and all indie bookstores in your town, anywhere you can get books from indie bookstore. We really love that. So thank you again, Ellen, for supporting Roundabout, for taking the time to be with us. Everyone and people who are not currently in Oregon as well. Thank you, Dave, for joining us from further away. This will be up on YouTube, so if you have friends that weren't able to make it, please have them go check out our Roundabout YouTube channel. And we hope to see everyone at the next event, book club, and hopefully again in person soon. So please, everyone, have a great weekend and stay safe.
Thank you
for doing this.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right.